This is Damon Fordham, author and historian, as well as adjunct professor of history at the Citadel and Charleston Southern University. Not very long ago, a good friend of mine passed, but I'm going to talk about a little bit here today, who was widely known in some circles. But there's a reason that I just played that tune. That was Lift Every Voice and Sing, often known as the Negro National Anthem, written back in the early 1900s as a protest against lynching and segregation and such. And here in Charleston, South Carolina in 2015, shortly after Walter Scott, a young African-American man who was killed by a policeman while running away from him, being shot in the back 8 times. And fortunately, Officer Michael Slager, who did the slaying, is today behind bars. But Muhiyyidin D'Baha, also known by his government name of Muhiyyidin Moy, he was behind a major demonstration behind that. And he was also the guy who linked up Fidel Santana, a young Dominican gentleman who filmed the incident as it happened. It was he who got Mr. Santana together with the Scott family, which led to the prosecution of Officer Slager. But anyway, at the protest against the shooting back around April of 2015, we were at North Charleston City Hall protesting this incident when he asked me to get up and play Lift Every Voice and Sing, the Negro National Anthem, on my harmonica for the crowd. So it's only fitting that I do this tribute to him by beginning with that song. Now, who was Muhiyyidin D'Baha? He was a young activist who was killed, 32 years old. He was killed in New Orleans, Louisiana, shot on the night of February the 5th, 2018, in the leg by, as of the time of this video, an unknown assailant, and died the following morning. And this video is done some 4 or 5 days after the fact. And so a lot of us are still in mourning. He was an activist. He was affiliated as the local spokesperson for the Black Lives Matter movement. And he was a very controversial fellow as a result of that. A lot of people spoke ill of him who didn't really know him that well. And he has quite an interesting story, but I think it's best that those of us who know him personally tell some of his story as to who he really was before people look at these websites written by people with a negative agenda, paint him as something that he wasn't. Well, I'm going to tell you from firsthand experience what he was. I met Muhiyyidin D'Baha back in the latter part of 2014. There was a march in Charleston, South Carolina against the Trayvon Martin killing and various other things that were happening in the African-American community at that time. So while I was among the people who were getting ready to march, this tall young man with locks came up to me and just started talking to me as he knew who I was, apparently from the newspapers or radio or television. And I'm wondering, who is this guy? But I was pretty impressed that he knew who I was, so I got to know him, and we went on this march, and he really impressed me. He came up to me because he understood my expertise in history, and he wanted to get some historical background on leadership issues. So anyway, after the Walter Scott incident, he was propelled in local and to a lesser degree national prominence for speaking up against that and various other ills within the community at the time. Not too long after that, of course, was the killing of 9 parishioners at Mother Emanuel AME here in Charleston. And there was a town hall meeting on the public broadcasting system that was led by the late journalist Gwen Eiffel. I was one of the people who was supposed to be on the panel, but I was bumped off at the very last moment before the filming started. And we were all gathered at the Circular Congregational Church where the filming was to take place in front of this panel and an audience. And so he was complaining to me that he was not on the program and that the people who were being asked to speak were by and large not African Americans from Charleston. And so I just gave him one bit of advice: be you. He was him, all right. Because throughout the filming, as they were talking with these experts, so to speak, that he began to interrupt the proceedings and asking very hard questions like, why weren't there people who were actually from Charleston for the most part on the panel? And that why were they acting like everything was so lovey-dovey in Charleston after the shooting when it really wasn't? And this annoyed a lot of people. And so they cut all of his scenes out of the final broadcast. But after it was over with, I got with him and I said, well, you are you, all right. I said, be you. And you listened. But he had an interesting pattern of going to a lot of meetings at, say, places like North Charleston City Hall, where he would openly confront the mayor and other such people about policies regarding the poor and African Americans, as well as other underserved people. And there are a number of occasions where he was arrested for disrupting these meetings. And so this gave him this image of being a firebrand and this terrible radical person. Well, the fact was he was radically angry about radically bad situations. And then there was the issue of Black Lives Matter, which to a lot of people, you say Black Lives Matter, it's like, whoa, they begin to think something like the new Black Panther movement or something of that sort. But actually, Muhiyyidin D'Baha was a man who did not hate humans. He hated injustice done to humans. It's important to make that distinction because not too long after all of this, there was a police lieutenant in Berkeley County, South Carolina, by the name of Lieutenant Will Rogers, who was shot and wounded at a gas station. And so he had some serious wounds to his health. He spent a lot of time at the Medical University Hospital afterwards. And although he was released, it was Muhiyyidin D'Baha, the head of the local Black Lives Matter chapter, who organized a prayer vigil for Lieutenant Rogers, and from what I understand, also met with his family too. Now, he did not do this for the cameras. I'm telling you this because I was there. I saw this happen when he had the prayer vigil. And he didn't call a lot of cameras or anything to it. He did it because he felt it was the right thing to do. Now, would a man who was a publicity hound, would a man who was full of hatred do something like that? No, I think not. And then on another occasion, I remember being with him when he had a group of children at this workshop. And he just sat down with the children and he told them to look at pictures and magazines and cut out collages and tell them what they saw. And he let the children speak about what they saw and what they experienced. And he also taught children how to play the drums. He loved playing drums, you see. In fact, here's a picture of him and myself. Let's see, this was about summer of 2016. This is me playing the harmonica and Lewis Smith, a local activist, and that's Muhiyyidin right there in the center with the red cap playing on the drums. And these are some children from Charleston's west side at the Arthur Christopher Community Center over on Charleston's west side. And that's what he loved to do. He loved inspiring the youth along with these type of things. And the very last time that I saw him, it was in June of 2017 at a Juneteenth festival over on Mosquito Beach here in South Carolina. That's him in the center in green, and that's myself. And there's this young activist out of Colleton County, South Carolina, known as Peace Be Still. In fact, she was the one who sent me this photo. And I don't remember the name of the others. I just know they were from Colleton County. But in either case, though, that was my last time seeing him. And he was talking about how he needed some rest and he needed to rejuvenate himself. And that was understood. Anyway, let's see, this was about Martin Luther King Day 2018. I was one of the speakers at this program at Charleston's Marion Square for King Day. And while I was there, I saw his brother from another mother, his best friend, his Jewish soul brother, if you would, Brandon Fish, a really great guy and a mutual friend of ours. And, I knew how close he was with Muhiyyidin, so I said, where's Muhiyyidin these days? I hadn't seen him in a while. And he said, well, he's gone to Louisiana, and he's kind of laying low. And I said, oh, okay, fine. And as far as I knew, that was just pretty much the end of the discussion. And then on February the 6th, I came in from one of my classes and I saw on Facebook where he had been shot and eventually died. And so no one knew who the assailant was as yet. And needless to say, a lot of us were devastated. The Baha'i community, of which he was a member, you see the name Muhiyyidin D'Baha, he got that from Abdul Baha, one of the great teachers of that faith. And of course it was them, a lot of various African-American political portions of the community, as well as a lot of whites too, a lot of people of every race actually, because the Baha'i faith is primarily about the unity of mankind, and so a lot of what he did represented that, I might add. But what bothered me is that right after all of this, you had a lot of things where people were posting that since he was with Black Lives Matter, oh, he was this terrible person, he hated police, and so on and so forth. No. I got on Fox News' comment site, and I just told a lot of these people, listen, you need to stop this because there are people out here grieving. You don't know who this man was about. And when you're up here saying all these ugly things about someone who has just passed and left behind a family, are you proud of that? Is this something that you want to tell your children that you have done? Do you actually feel better about this? You need to think before you speak and before you write. But Cheryl Mack, great friend of mine, whose husband David Mack was I was on his radio show a lot back in the 90s. She said this about that. I got to share it with you. Those trying to dim his light with ugliness will not succeed. Only cowards kick a man when he is down and can't fight back. So vultures may come but will end up eating their own flesh and won't realize it until it's too late. Their darkness will be overtaken by his bright light from within his spirit. My good friend Cheryl Mack said that, and that's probably the best tribute that I could give to him. So right now, he inspired a lot of people because he had the courage to stand up to people and say things that they either lack the articulation or the courage to say themselves. So there's a concentrated movement around right now to preserve his memory and to those who knew him and knew what he was really about to tell his story. There's a line in that play Hamilton. There's a beautiful song called Who Lives, Who Dies, Who Will Tell Your Story? Well, we who know him are making the effort to tell his story. This is Damon Fordham talking about the memory and stories of Mr. Muhiyyidin D'Baha, who lived a beautiful life before it was cut down at the age of 32 on February the 6th, 2018.